My name is Audrey Ottevanger. I'm going to be sharing about expanding to Asia, when is the right time, and what is actually the right strategy. So let me start with talking about Econ Pay first. Now, we are a payment solutions provider, and we are a credit card acquirer, plus also we provide local payment methods globally. We have about 600 team members and 6 offices worldwide, of which the 600, about half of our team members are dedicated to IT development because we have a very strong payments platform. So today I'm going to be speaking about, Alex, if you don't mind, if you can help me because I can't move to the next page. Yes, thank you. So today I'll be covering the diversity of the APAC region, where I will speak about opportunities and challenges that lie. I will also talk about the strategy about growing global, which is a global strategy with a local execution. I will focus on China and Southeast Asia countries, whereas Kelvin from People will speak about India and Japan. So what is this APAC opportunity? So let's start there. Going to the next slide. Now, this APAC opportunity, how big is it? It consists of 48 countries with 4.5 billion people, and we have a double-digit e-commerce growth. The speed of growth, we define it as 2 speeds, fast and faster, right? There is no slowing down here in Asia. We have a huge emerging middle class here, and we are a mobile-first region, where mobile phones access is much more than laptops here. We have ecosystem challenges, obviously, but it's being resolved. And that's by the businesses of startups as well as big international firms coming in, and especially in countries like Indonesia and Philippines. Now, digital payments is growing even more, especially now with the pandemic, where governments are encouraging the use of digital payments and less handling of cash. So no 2 countries in Asia are entirely the same. The region must be treated not as a whole, but in buckets, as there are similarities, but there is no one size that fits all in Asia. So let's go on. I'd like to talk about like the main categories that we have here in Asia and what contributes to the growth. So before COVID, the categories that were exponentially growing were retail, travel, online media, and ride hailing. Currently, groceries, food deliveries, online media streaming, e-gaming, along with edutech, insurtech, and medtech is what's growing here, right? And if we go to the next slide, I'd like to share with you this chart that I have here, which I find quite interesting. It shows with the main retail categories, which are the winners, which have massive growth, and losers, which have deficit growth. So winners, I mean, we can skip disposable gloves because we all know that there's a huge growth in that. But what I find interesting is bread machines. Of course, during the lockdown, everyone's experimenting making cakes or making bread at home. What I'd like to know is what's going to happen with the bread machine after. And of course, we have the toilet paper phenomenon as well. Now, the biggest losers, which are deficit in growth, which are the categories that surround travel. So that's luggage, cameras, swimwear. The e-commerce demographics have also expanded, where the older generation were forced to go online to buy essentials when we were in lockdown, which has now opened up a new age group for e-commerce now. So what online businesses will thrive in the new year? My guess is businesses surrounding working from home, staying from home solutions will continue to grow. This is as businesses navigate how to get all the staff working from home or part-time working in the office, and kind of find solutions about how we're going to be able to come to a new norm. Retail will take a while to recover, and probably global travel will only start next year. So let's start with China. China also known as the mighty dragon, right? So it's the world's largest e-commerce market where foreign businesses want a piece of the Chinese buyer. It's transacting at $1.3 trillion of the global e-commerce transactions, which is actually half of the world's e-commerce turnover, but there's still room for growth. Projections actually estimate that the Chinese market will top $6 trillion in 2020. But it will be interesting to see how the pandemic has actually changed that situation, or has it really? It is a real complicated market for foreign businesses to navigate, and many has been burned by the dragon before. The intricacies of this market is that they have their own payment systems, haven't opened up the market up to international until recently. Visa and Amex has recently started entering the market as well. So you have a low card penetration, high smartphone usage, and high usage of mobile wallets here. And let's go into the consumer behavior. Now, the Chinese are very heavy social media users, right? Top sites using WeChat and Weibo. And they're not being used only for social messaging, but also blogging, consuming media, payments, paying all kinds of things on the app. And of course, you have Alipay as well, all within the super apps family. Super apps run the lives of Chinese today. There's also a new generation that needs attention, Fu'edai, which is the rich second generation, and it is the luxury consumer of the future. They are the children of the nouveau rich Chinese, right? Lap up trends, show off their wealth, loves to have their ego flattered. Now they have very high disposable income. So if you are in luxury goods, this is the generation you need to target. Now the Chinese demand for superior user experience with a very easy one-click checkout on mobile. And that's because the super apps have set the benchmark so high where you do not have any roadblocks for checking out, right? So any apps that come out or want to target the Chinese buyer have to reach that same benchmark as well. The Chinese like busy looking websites, which flashing lights, pop-ups, which will never work in the West. But also the color red is very auspicious, right? Which is often used when money is concerned. Now, this may sound a little bit silly, but in China, especially with all the superstitions, foreign businesses need to be extra culturally sensitive. The Chinese consumer actively leaves reviews on products and services and is very ready to complain when services are bad or they feel that they've been cheated. Now be aware of this and monitor it closely, or before you know it, it might spiral out of hand. Now let's move on to payments. Next slide, right? Now, as a nation of smartphone lovers, China has quickly adopted digital payments or digital wallets, which are now used to pay majority of e-commerce transactions. So the major digital wallets brand includes market leaders like Alipay, WeChat Pay, and others as well. Cards are the second most popular payment option, which are local cards of China UnionPay. International card providers and payment processors face significant challenges where they must apply for a license to operate in China, and the right that has only opened up to international players in 2018. Now, activity that could arouse suspicion of fraud or identity of theft in other countries are part of the local culture in China. So, for example, there is a tradition of hongbao, which is monetary gifts given in red envelopes, usually during events, which now is digitalized with digital wallets allowing the use of transfer of multiple hongbaos to recipients at once. And with the mobile phones, which is such an integral part of the Chinese consumers' lives, e-shoppers are very comfortable using their devices to make very high value transactions as well. Moving on, Indonesia, one of the fastest growing economies in the world. And its rapid development has largely based on exports of goods before. Very young nation. right? Imagine with a population of 264 million, the average age of 30 years. So therefore, half are under the age of 30. So what are the consumer behaviors? Going to next slide, right? There are about 40 million digitally connected urban users. 70% are engaged in social media, yet 7% shop online. That's a huge difference there. This opens up an opportunity, though, for retailers to stimulate the e-commerce by addressing concerns of Indonesians having the concern of security of paying online. Now, Indonesia is urbanizing quickly, and while the top 10 cities contribute 55% of GDP, there are the 5 smaller cities emerging as hidden gems as well. Businesses need to take note of the growth of other cities and not just the major cities, right? To recognize that which are the cities that have the similar consumption patterns and characteristics. Also know that it's a very unequal wealth distribution in Indonesia. There are 4 tiers. Top tier, 1% of Indonesian owns 49% of the total wealth of the nation, while the poorest 40% own a meager 1.4%. Now, population divided into 4 tiers: elites, 1%, middle class, 20%, aspirational, 44%, and then the poor, which is 35%. Understand the real power of the Indonesians, the spending power of Indonesians lie between the top 2 tiers. Now, there is a local language that you must, if you're going into Indonesia, your website and your support has to be in Bahasa. And of course, the main religion, which is Muslim, and therefore, if you're into food products, it has to be halal as well. Now, as for payments, there are many local cards in Indonesia, and although you see that number of 34%, it's a very low per capita and centered around only the metro areas, right? Now, online banking is actually still very, very popular. It's a form of cash transfer between one account to another, which are offered by the local Indonesian banks. They build their own payment services, right? And in order to make an online purchases, shoppers need to first register, then you're issued a physical security token that needs to be authenticated. Digital wallets are currently the 3rd most used payment method here. Digital wallets are rapidly increasing in popularity, aided obviously with the rising of smartphone penetration as well. And it is used for one of all 5 e-commerce transactions. There's ATM payments. So if you don't know what ATM payments is, it's actually an ATM transfer. It's a cash transfer, obviously, from one account to another. But with this method, the customer starts their transaction online, whether you're buying a service or a product, you get a voucher code or reference code. You go to an ATM machine to actually pay in the ATM machine by inserting cash or through card. And then you have convenience store payments. And it's also starting your transaction online, but then you go to a store, which is like a 7-Eleven, a convenience store, to take that reference number and you pay over the counter as well. So you'll see the distribution of different payment methods and the percentage of it, which actually will target the different target groups or audiences that you are reaching for as well. Singapore, my home base. Now, despite its small geographical footprint and just a population of about 5.6 million people, Singapore is a major e-commerce market in Southeast Asia. The growth of the online shopping market in Singapore is fueled by young, tech-savvy population. 80% of Singaporeans is under the age of 54. We have a real huge growing middle class as well. The country is one of the wealthiest nations in the world, with the 7th highest GDP per capita globally. It's a very matured market with English as the main language and offers an extremely business-friendly environment. Many foreign businesses use Singapore as a point of entry to the rest of Asia. So let's see what Singaporeans are like, right? we're always looking for a very good bargain. So even though we have high disposable income, but it's still very price sensitive. Avid online shoppers, right? We're shopping locally as well as international as well, very open to international brands. There's actually no need for localization. And this means that English is spoken. So therefore, websites are do not have to localize that way. Also, very high rates of social media, especially Facebook and Instagram as well. And there is a demand for seamless user experience across devices. So an omni-channel is expected here, which means that the buyer can start their purchase on a phone, complete it on a laptop, and go into a store to collect, or vice versa. And the payments that we have in Singapore is cards. Cards are the most used method for e-commerce payments, accounting for about 68% of all transactions. When shopping online, credit cards trumps debit cards as well, and Visa is the most popular card brand here. This is probably due to the attractive rewards that are linked to credit cards given by issuers. Remember, I started by saying Singaporeans love a good bargain. So issuers of credit cards give discounts, rebates, points, gifts, etc. Therefore, Singaporeans all have credit cards. Not all, but a very wide majority of Singaporeans do have that. So all new e-commerce credit card payments that are processed through local bank accounts here in Singapore should be 3DS enabled, where shoppers will receive a one-time password on their phones, which they need to use for authorizing the transaction on either the web browser or their smartphone. Digital wallets are also growing rapidly. They are already the second most popular payment method in Singapore, accounting for about 14% of all e-commerce transactions. We've got major international brands like PayPal, Alipay, and regional brands like GrabPay as well. USD is generally accepted for international online payments, as SGD is very strong and consumers are very international here. Thailand. Now, Thailand has tremendous growth opportunities and its digital infrastructure is continuing to improve. Young and tech-savvy population and a growing middle class demands for products and services locally as well as internationally. Currently, e-commerce transactions are very small part of what the overall retail numbers are. However, it is growing and with an estimate of 35% annually. Now, the Thais consumer behavior, they rely very heavily on social media to purchase. Facebook Live, Insta Stories is how they look into product demonstrations, right? They spend many hours in the day accessing the internet via mobile than any other country in the world. Customer service is very important, support or via phone or chat, and all these has to be localized in time. And there is a huge increase in spend of luxury items as well. It's going to be very interesting to watch the explosion of digital growth in Thailand in the next few years. And what do Thais pay with? So when you see this chart here, the next page, when you see the chart here, where cards here are again the locally issued cards, but online banking transfers and cash-based methods are actually predominant. Cash-based payment methods here are over-the-counter payments using convenience stores, as I was speaking about before, or even supermarkets, where customers can make their over-the-counter payments using vouchers, right? There's also the use of QR codes here via your mobile phone, which has been gaining lots of popularity as well. Now, payment fraud is prevalent to merchants. So merchant security credentials are very important here. And you must offer Thai baht to the Thai consumer. Oh, okay, so let's move on to Philippines. Now, Philippines is one of the most mobile countries, right? And arguably the most underestimated as well. E-commerce market in Southeast Asia. The internet penetration is under 50%. Majority of the population is still underbanked or even unbanked. And with 7,000 plus islands, logistics is still a challenge, but improving here. What does the Filipino consumer look like? Very comfortable with English, mobile natives. And what is interesting about Filipinos is that they prefer personalization over privacy. This means that Filipino centennials want to be in control of their data and want to get the most of sharing it. There's a research that shows that 77% of them are very happy to share data with websites if it makes the right recommendations to them. So they're all about social media. Product demonstration is part of their user experience, very, very important for them as part as their purchase behavior as well. So if you are reaching Filipinos, always make sure you have the demonstration of your products and services on how to use it. Moving on to payment methods. Cash type payments is number one for Filipinos. Right, so but cash type payments here, it actually is bucketed into actual cash, e-wallets, over-the-counter payments. Let's talk a bit about e-wallets here. GCash, Smart Money, two of the most popular digital wallet services that are used by shoppers for online purchases. GCash is a reloadable prepaid card co-branded with MasterCard that enables shoppers to pay by text messages or on their mobile or desktop, much in the same way as you would as a credit card. Over-the-counter payments, this is a cash transfer, as I mentioned before, where you start your payment online and you go either to a convenience store or a supermarket or even a bank to complete the payments. Now remember, Filipinos have a lower average spending compared to the rest of Asia. It's only about $29 US. Vietnam. Now, Vietnam has risen from poor to now middle income country in just 5 years. They have very cheap labor. They started off anyway with cheap labor, an educated workforce, and a business-friendly environment. Then Vietnam has managed to attract some major tech manufacturers, companies to set up there. And as a result, the country has now an export sector, which then enriched the local workforce, turning it into a creation of demand for goods and services beyond their borders. It has one of the youngest average population of 30 years old, which has the highest predicted growth rates in Southeast Asia. Now, the Vietnamese behavior, right, is that, again, they're mobile natives, right? Vietnamese is a must, right, when you are targeting the Vietnamese buyer here. The government still monitors all online content and suppresses any content that seems subversive. Consumers, though, are craving connectivity, information, entertainment, anything that is smart. All things that give pleasure for work, rest, play are key items of purchase here. The smartphone, laptop, motorbike, right? Smart items, devices. Vietnamese love it. Esports have made an explosion in Vietnam. The Vietnamese government decided to consider e-sport as a form of sport, which means that this has encouraged to develop and grow e-sport like any other sport in Vietnam. Now, online gaming has become such a huge part of socializing and entertainment in Vietnam, and therefore making it the biggest market for e-sport in Asia. Let's talk about their payments habits. Digital wallets are set to be the fastest growing e-commerce payment methods, expanding about 28% per year to become the second most used methods after cards. And cards here again, we're talking about local issued cards. Popular wallets are like Momo and Nganlong in the market. Cash on delivery is still a significant part of the Vietnamese online shopping. However, the government is trying to grow that or move away from cash as well. Other than that, there is a withholding tax. You must note that all transactions, well, 10% of all transactions go into withholding tax when you are processing in Vietnam. Moving on to Malaysia, my original home. Now, Malaysia's e-commerce market has grown rapidly in recent years. It's fueled by rising of smartphone penetration and a willingness for shoppers to buy from overseas. Merchants new to this country can take advantage of growing regulatory and physical infrastructure designed to ease e-commerce in this very exciting market. The Malaysian consumer spends more on average than rest of Southeast Asia, excluding Singapore, that is. They use both laptops and mobiles simultaneously. There's a shift in purchasing on mobile. So therefore, with the average ticket size on mobile also getting higher. English is widely spoken, but Bahasa and Chinese is used for outside of the metro areas. There are three main religions, with Muslim being the national religion. And we're very open to international brands. Now, trust is a concern here. Trust of security online, right? But interestingly, Malaysians can be quite open to different sites. And what I mean by that is because Malaysians just love a good deal. So they will find ways to get better value. So for example, there is what Malaysians are known for is that they love to buy TV set-up boxes that are able to stream content. So which means getting content from all over the world, which may be not very legitimate. Also, the omni-channel experience is very, it's a demand for, because Malaysian shops across devices and as a national pastime, walking around shopping centers. So therefore, they don't mind picking up in store as well. Now, what's interesting is that gamification has become very popular, which means that putting a sort of a game into your app to increase engagement. The idea is keeping the consumer engaged longer onto your app or your website, which translates into a purchase. So merchants keep building games into apps to ensure that they increase sales that way. Let's talk about the payment methods for Malaysia. Bank transfers, so forgive this, there is just an error in this chart, but bank transfers are the most used e-commerce payment method at about 46% here. Now, the use of this method is also forecasted to grow. Now, of course, there's cards as well being used, but there are debit cards that are actually quite prevalent when you look at the chart for cards. And it's not because it's unbanked the population, but rather not wanting to take on debt. There is also the payment network Malaysia launched, which is Malaysia's first real-time retail payment platform, FPX, which is expected to boost electronic payments by modernizing the payments infrastructure. So that's for instant credit transfer via mobile phone to both the citizens and businesses as well. Digital wallets are growing, both regional and international players investing into the market. Malaysia is the home of Grab. Now note that MYR, or the ringgit, is a controlled currency and cannot be settled outside the country. But the good news is that processing cross-border payments through an international acquirer doesn't trigger the international issuing fee for the buyer. Domestic interchange is controlled and 3DS is mandatory here. Now, let's talk about the solutions, or the fact that there is actually no one-size-fits-all for Asia. So some solutions to take note of when you're trying to expand is number one, prioritize the size of market. The more established a market is within the particular industry, the greater the competition is entrenched in that target segment. You have to weigh out the pros and cons of heading into a very crowded market, or you may want to carve out a foothold and lay foundations in a more undeveloped vertical within that market. To start with, companies can't go after everything at once, which means do not go out after Asia all at once, right? Select 1 to 3 markets. Grouping a related set of markets often helps with the execution as well. So you can such as grouping Chinese or Bahasa speaking markets or several Southeast Asian countries, characteristics which are similar together. Just to give you an example of our merchant that takes the strategy of expanding to just 3 countries in Asia, Philippines, Thailand, and Indonesia, because they have a big growing middle class. And that which has a disposable income willing to spend on their product. Target audience are located in metro and suburban cities. And they're not looking at the giant markets like China or Hong Kong just yet because of the competition that they have to face going into these big markets. Secondly, the cultural sensitivities. Different countries across Asia have different cultures and practices when it comes to doing businesses. You need to adopt the way of doing things in the local market. The practices accepted in the West and other parts of the world may not be well received in the countries in Asia. While at the same time, organizations need to be mindful of cultural sensitivities in the way they communicate to your partners, clients, customers, governments, right? Language, for example, do you need to localize your website for Asia, which depends on the country? As I mentioned, English is predominantly spoken in Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, and Hong Kong. But for other markets, localization is needed. Chinese for China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and of course, Thai, Bahasa, Vietnamese for the individual markets. Regulation. You need to ask whether there is local incorporation that is needed when you expand. Can you start without it? Are there any licenses that are required? Many local agencies and government agencies can help with that. In Malaysia and Indonesia, there is strong regulations for financial controls, and the ringgit is a non-tradable currency, which cannot be settled outside the country. Similar to Indonesia as well, highly regulated market, and typically a local entity is required to process rupiah locally. I mentioned that Vietnam has a 10% withholding tax for all transactions. Singapore is a very matured market and offers an extremely business-friendly environment. For Thailand, they are implementing a VAT for foreign digital services. Next, consumer behavior. Consumers in Asia Pacific are one of the most integrated shoppers as well, mostly likely to be using a variety of channels when they're purchasing. So they start browsing on the mobile phone, checking out on the laptop, picking up at store, right? And I mentioned this for Malaysia and Singapore, very fond of cross-channel shopping. The reasons for a variety of channel, using a variety of channel is because of pricing. They want to check pricing. They want to check the quality of product, right? Special offer and discounts as well. And remember, Asians are heavy users of social media. Now, let me leave you with some tips here. So firstly, you need to match the business to the payment methods that are used by your target market. Now, you will not have a good conversion rate just offering cards from Europe, for example. Offering local payment methods in each country means giving your target consumers the method that they're used to be paying in. Note that each of these methods have different threshold limits and conversion rates will vary. Offer the local currencies for each country rather than Euro or USD. One of the main reasons of drop-offs is because that you're not offering local currency, which consumers are comfortable with. Number 3, it is very important to either have a mobile optimized site or a mobile app when reaching Asian consumers. And lastly, use the principle of KISS, which is keep it simple and straightforward. Asian consumers are tech savvy and don't want to jump through hurdles to pay. Implement one-click payment or simple checkout flows. No lengthy forms to fill up, please. So thank you for joining me, and I hope I've earned the privilege of your time. Thank you.